welcome back. As we earlier said, we should talk more about special concern given to the efforts to stand up to climate change, and also looking over the climate causes or the causes that cause those challenges, and which is a potential danger not only to one country but worldwide. And to shed more light on this issue, we're very delighted to be joined live over the phone by Mrs. Amira Said, journalist. Good morning, Ms. Amira.
Good morning.
How are you doing? First of all, how do you see the keenness of Egypt when it comes to address the issue of climate change causes?
Definitely, Egypt is giving a top priority for this file, bearing in mind that now there are numerous challenges facing the African continent in general, and definitely Egypt in particular. And this was reflected in the recent participation by the Environment Minister, Dr. Yasmin Fouad, in the 19th session of the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment held recently in Ethiopia. And actually, the Minister Fouad stressed the paramount importance of providing advocacy for environmental protection in Africa in order to ensure that the basic human needs are met adequately and in a sustainable manner. Now, when we are talking about the climate change, it's not like a continental challenge, it is a global challenge. It's also not just an environmental challenge, it is a developmental challenge due to its direct impact on all vital sectors that are required to improve the sustainable development in all countries. So definitely, if you are talking about the Egyptian stance and efforts in this regard, Egypt is giving a top priority for this file. And this was reflected also in Egypt's presidency of COP27 held last year in Sharm el-Sheikh, when Egypt stressed the paramount importance of moving from vision into action, and stressing the paramount importance of meeting the previous pledges in order to address these challenges.
Right. So how do you evaluate, or how do you assess Egypt's efforts in the field of combating climate change and in working to overcome the repercussions? Of course, we're going to address the efforts first of standing up to the climate change, and then talk in detail about the repercussions. But let's first take a closer look over the efforts to stand up to the challenges of the climate change.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely, it's very important to address this file through the solution lens. We have been speaking a lot about the impacts of climate change, but now it's time to address these challenges and provide more practical solutions. Definitely, Egypt has its local and national strategy for climate change 2050, which aims at addressing the issue and the impacts of climate change. Egypt also has stepping up its efforts in order to switch to ensure the green transition in different fields. Now we have seen that now there is ongoing coordination between all ministries. If we are talking about the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Transport, because now the environmental dimension has been integrated in all vital sectors here in Egypt. Also, from economic perspective, Egypt was the first country in the Middle East to issue the green bonds. And also, if you are talking about the curbing the emissions, though Egypt's contribution to global emissions is very, very, very small, but actually Egypt is also bearing its responsibility to curb the emissions through relying on renewable energy. And definitely Egypt has great potential in this domain. For example, Egypt has a great project for solar energy, Binban project. We have the largest plant in Africa and the Middle East. There are also many projects related to wind power as well. This is also in addition to providing many incentives for the private sector to invest in clean energy projects. As I mentioned, that there is coordination between all ministries. If we look at the coordination between the Ministry of Transport and also the Ministry of Environment, there is also an initiative to reduce, using cars that are operated, increasing the usage of cars operated by renewable energy instead of traditional fuel in order to curb these emissions. We have seen now the sustainable and clean means of transportation. And actually, before hosting COP27, Sharm el-Sheikh was announced as a green city. So definitely there are many efforts. If we are talking also about agricultural field, definitely as climate change has a direct impact on the agricultural sector now, the agricultural sector is exerting more efforts to rely on some, we can say, new varieties, agricultural crops that can face the impact of climate change. How also to use modern irrigation systems to rationalize the usage of water, bearing in mind also that climate change has a direct impact on water security. So definitely there is ongoing coordination between all ministries and under the umbrella of the National Strategy for Climate Change 2050. If we are talking also about clean energy, the Ministry of Electricity announces that Egypt's plan is to produce 42% of Egypt's energy out of renewable energy, and this percentage is expected to further increase in the upcoming period. Yeah.
Right. And what about the looking over the repercussions also of the climate change?
Definitely, if we are talking about the repercussions of climate change on Egypt, the Nile Delta is the most vulnerable area in Egypt to the impacts of climate change. So now we have seen many efforts to, for example, coast protection measures being taken by the Egyptian government to address this file. So now how to combat, for example, coast erosion, how to curb salination percentages that have direct impact on the productivity of arable land here in Egypt. So definitely the climate change has a direct impact on various sectors. As I mentioned, there is a direct impact on water security in Egypt. So now many efforts are being exerted to rationalize the consumption of water in the agricultural sector. As I mentioned, in the Nile Delta, there are many projects, protection of coast projects. So definitely there are many efforts being exerted to address these repercussions.
Right. So to what extent is the state keen on inviting the private sector to take share in those efforts, and also the civil society? And this all is aiming to improve the environment in Egypt. I mean, where do you see the role of the private sector, and does it have a specific share when it comes to these efforts that are exerted day and night to upgrade the environment?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, yeah, Egypt is adopting a comprehensive approach and a holistic approach in dealing with the issue of climate change. And the holistic approach means that all stakeholders are involved in the climate action. If we are talking about civil society, we have seen that the civil society is playing a vital role in raising public awareness of climate change, launching many initiatives also to address climate change. If you are talking about the private sector, definitely there are many incentives being provided to private sector to also facilitate and attract more investment in the environmental sector. And we have to talk about this issue from a realistic perspective. Now, there is a fear from a private sector that the switch to green or the so-called green transition will not have the same economic profits as other projects. But actually now, the green projects, and also if you are talking about the economic dimension in the Egyptian National Strategy of Climate Change, you can see how there is a great potential for investing in green and environmentally friendly projects. So now, actually, on the real ground, there are many projects being implemented in collaboration with the private sector in Egypt. And this is also Egypt's vision regarding combating climate change in the African continent. Egypt is not tackling this file from, we can say, a unilateral lens. Egypt is trying to mobilize more efforts in order to address this challenge both in Egypt and also the African continent in general. We have to take into consideration that though Africa is the least contributor to global emissions, the total emissions of Africa doesn't exceed 4% of the overall global emissions. However, it is the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So whether on local level, on regional level, on continental level, Egypt is adopting this comprehensive approach, which brings together both like private and public sector, civil society, rural communities, and also scientific research as well.
Right. Also, talking about sustainable development, and we all know the climate change or standing to the hazards and challenges of climate change is on top of the goals of sustainable development. And this is where the role of scientific research and modern means also is introduced. Where do you see the role of scientific research in that particular domain? And do you think it's going to have its impact, successful impact over the means to stand up to the challenges of climate change?
Definitely, scientific research is part and parcel of the climate action. If we are talking about now providing solutions to climate action, so definitely the role of scientific research cannot be overlooked. As I mentioned, for example, in the agricultural sector, there is now great focus on how to produce or rely on more agricultural varieties that can face or address the impact of climate change. Also producing like crops that are not water heavily relying on water consumption. Definitely also, if we are talking about the modern technologies that are environmentally friendly, scientific research is also very important to develop more strategies and also having more technologies to address the climate change and provide the required solutions. But definitely, if we are talking about the role of scientific research, we cannot overlook the role of providing financial resources also to support this scientific research and also to implement the outcomes of this scientific research. For example, if we are talking about the green transition, there should be also we can say there should be more financial resources allocated to provide the infrastructure required for implementing such modern technologies and implement these steps. So as I mentioned, there is a comprehensive and holistic approach in order to address the climate change, whether we are talking about the scientific role, the economic role, and also the role of other stakeholders.
Right. You pointed out to a very important point, which is a comprehensive approach when it comes to standing up to the challenges of climate change that includes not only taking the repercussions seriously and studying the means to be able to stand up to the challenges, but also the financial resources, also harshening the laws and enforcing the laws, unifying the laws worldwide, which is very important. And of course, these elements, if they are not combined together, no real effect is going to be taken. Do you agree or no?
Exactly. And also you mentioned, you referred to a very important point, which is the legislative framework for regulations related to environmental issues. And actually here, we would like to refer to the environment law by the Egyptian government, which now puts a clear framework for implementing the climate action. Okay, so definitely Egypt has been making strides in this domain, and definitely we cannot like speak about how to implement the environmentally friendly action without putting, we can say, a legislative framework for all these issues. And also on international level, there is ongoing also like coordination between heads of states and also the authorities concerned regarding the regulations related to climate action, definitely.
Right. So also talk to us about awareness as one of the major elements when it comes to this comprehensive approachment. Without awareness, nothing could be effected, because if there are some nations until this very moment, and that 2023, and we're, I mean, approaching 2024, there is a complete lack of awareness of the dangers of climate change. They're still burning the garbage. They're still polluting the air around them. I mean, they are using toxic elements and poisons to get rid of endangered species and some animals also, which is totally wrong. They are eating, I mean, they're consuming the wrong food, like in China, for example. And this has a very bad effect. I mean, lots and lots of grave mistakes that are committed by humans who are the source of the dangers of climate change. And the reason for all that is lack of awareness.
So exactly, I totally agree with you. It's very important to also focus on like enhancing the public awareness of the issue of climate change. But let me tell you that if we compare like the momentum that is taking place in the recent period, we can say that there is also somehow progress and the issue of public awareness of climate change. Maybe some people feel like the climate change doesn't have like a direct impact on their daily life. Maybe people like focus on the economic issues, but actually, if we are adopting this like comprehensive approach, if people really are really aware of we can say the numerous impacts of climate change on their daily life, there will be more like this will drive collective action towards this issue. Definitely, there are still some malpractices that are piling pressure on our environment. But here I'd like to refer to many awareness campaigns launched by the Environment Ministry, whether through TV channels or on grounds in rural areas. How can people collaborate with the government in addressing this challenge? Because, as I mentioned, all stakeholders should be involved in this in climate action, and definitely local communities are part and parcel of this climate action. Definitely, there are, as I mentioned, some malpractices, but this requires also more efforts in terms of like enhancing public awareness. Yeah.
So what about the mechanisms that would boost investing the environment fields? I mean, there are some, I mean, elements that would need or require a special mechanism in order to be able to create a clean environment. And we have seen successful experiences like that, like in Sharm el-Sheikh, for example, and that was followed by different governorates declared as green cities, total green cities. So definitely there are mechanisms that should be applied, and those mechanisms, if they could be applied on larger scale, there could be a great improvement. So if you like to elaborate over this thing also, this element.
Yeah, definitely. I just mentioned that on global level, there was like a fear of this green transition, that it will not have the same economic profits, and that's why the private sector wasn't like interested in investing in such kind of projects. But now there is a global momentum and also regional momentum. If we are talking about COP27 held in Sharm el-Sheikh last year, private sector was actively present in all sessions, and this was also opened a channel for communication between all stakeholders. Now, many green projects they have proved that they have many economic profits. Egypt, if we are talking about Egypt in particular, Egypt has great potential in this domain. If we are talking about, for example, investing in renewable energy projects, Egypt has great potential in terms of its natural wealth. If we are talking about the wind power, the solar power, the hydropower as well, Egypt has great potential, and definitely there are now many projects being implemented in collaboration with private sector and also international partners. So we can say there is a progress in this domain. As you mentioned, for example, Sharm el-Sheikh, which is one of the largest tourist attractions here in Egypt, has been announced as a green city, and still tourists also prepare to enjoy such a kind of tourism. That's why, for example, if you are talking about ecotourism as well, it has a great potential and economic potential as well. So the private sector now became more, we can say, interested in investing in such a kind of project. We have spoken also about the green bond that was, as Egypt was the first country in the Middle East and Africa to issue such a kind of bond. Also, the Egyptian government has offered many incentives and for private sector to invest in such kinds, and we have seen that in many ministerial meetings under the chairmanship of the Prime Minister, Dr. Mustafa Madbouli. He stressed all the time the importance of providing more incentives and eliminating any obstacles that may face investors in terms of in the environmental sector in particular. Yeah.
Right. Also, when you were talking about, standing up to the challenges of climate change, and you stressed over the comprehensive approachment. The comprehensive approachment includes also the idea of one thing is leading to the other. I mean, there are some things that are not related to the climate, that are not related to the environment, but they have a direct impact over the climate change, like for example the economic greed, like the illegal hunting, like the illegal industries, and the violations in the leftover of industries. I mean, those are all things that immediately lead to climate change and challenges of climate change. I mean, we have seen we're already seeing wildfires right now in some parts of the world. When you read the news, we have seen the fires in Australia because of the eradication of the forests to affect some buildings there. I mean, we have seen the illegal hunting in some places in the world. We have seen the malpractices of eliminating the endangered species for consumption in China that led to COVID also. We have seen the wild life markets in China, which is very dangerous. So many mistakes and violations are committed that might not look really not that important, but they are the root cause for the problem.
Definitely, totally agree with you. Now, as I mentioned, when we are talking about climate change, it's not just environmental challenge, it's a developmental challenge because it affects all sectors and all people. And as you mentioned now, the impacts of climate change, they are crystal clear. Now we have seen like the heat wave, the wildfires. So it's become like more clear than ever. So this requires also swift action. That's why the developed countries and those who are the largest contributors to global emissions, and also those who are committing like such great malpractices that you mentioned, should bear the responsibility towards this fight. And here comes the importance of the climate summit and how to move from pledges into action. There should be clear commitments, and also there should be clear sanctions in case of not abiding by these pledges. That's why the main theme of COP27 was like together for implementation. Now it's not just time to talk about the impact of climate change. We all know, because they are now crystal clear. We have seen the rising sea levels, and everything. And also, we can say this also issue affects the food security. So definitely, this requires swift action. And here, as I mentioned recently, the African Ministerial Conference on Environment tackled this issue. And in September, there will be the African Climate Summit. In November, there will be the COP28, the 28th edition of the Conference of Parties that will be held in UAE.
Right.
And definitely, it will tackle how to address such malpractices and how to put like clear framework for future plan to address climate action.
Right. Mr. Amira Said, the journalist, would like to thank you so much talking to us in the Breakfast Show this morning, and you have a good day. And we're going to go to a short break and we'll come to continue the Breakfast Show, so stay with us.